It was late at night when Mark was driving home after a long day of work. His old truck made loud noises as he drove down an empty road. Between his job and raising his 5-year-old daughter, Lily, life had been tough. Money was short and sleep was rare. As he drove, he saw a car parked on the side of the road with its lights blinking. A woman stood next to it, looking worried. Beside her was a little child, clinging to her leg, scared. Mark slowed down and thought about stopping. He was tired, and helping strangers wasn't always easy. But then he noticed how stressed the woman looked and how scared the child seemed. With a deep breath, he pulled over. "Do you need help?" Mark asked, walking toward them. The woman looked up, surprised but relieved. "Thank goodness you stopped," she said. "I have a flat tire, and I don't know how to fix it." "No problem," Mark replied with a smile. "I can handle it." He crouched down to talk to the little girl, who was staring at him nervously. "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll get your mom back on the road soon." The woman introduced herself as Laura. She explained that they were returning from a family visit when the tire went flat. With no phone signal and almost no cars passing by, she felt stuck. Mark nodded. "You're not alone now. Let me grab my tools." For the next 20 minutes, Mark worked hard in the cold night. His hands were rough from years of work, but he managed to change the tire. All the while, Laura watched him quietly, comforting her sleepy child. When he finished, Mark stood up and dusted off his hands. "All done. You're good to go." Laura reached for her wallet. "Please let me pay you. You didn't have to stop, especially this late." Mark shook his head. "No need. Just happy I could help." "But," Laura started, but Mark interrupted gently. "I have a kid too," he said, nodding at the sleeping child. "I'd want someone to help me if I were in your place." Laura stayed quiet, moved by his kindness. As Mark got back into his truck and drove off, she couldn't stop thinking about his tired face and worn-out clothes. There was something special about him that stayed with her long after he left. Neither of them knew it yet, but this small act of kindness would change their lives forever. As Mark drove away, Laura stood by her car, watching his truck disappear into the night. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this man than met the eye. His kindness had been genuine. No strings attached, no expectation of anything in return. And yet, she could see the weariness in his face, the frayed edges of his clothes, and the way his hands bore the marks of hard work. "Who is he?" Laura murmured to herself as she buckled her sleepy child into the back seat. She thought about how effortlessly Mark had taken control of the situation, calming both her and her daughter with his calm demeanor and reassuring words. It wasn't just his skill with the tire, it was his heart. In a world where people often looked out for themselves, Mark had gone out of his way to help 2 strangers at midnight, without expecting a single thing in return. The drive home felt quieter than before, but Laura's mind was racing. She replayed their brief conversation over and over again, the way he mentioned having a kid, the tired smile he gave when refusing payment. There was a story there, one she wanted to understand better. When Laura finally tucked her daughter into bed later that night, she sat alone in her living room, staring at the wall. Her thoughts kept returning to Mark. What kind of life did he lead? Was he struggling financially? Did he ever feel like anyone noticed his sacrifices? Laura knew what it was like to face tough times. Before building her successful business empire, she had been a single mother herself, working endless hours to make ends meet. She remembered the exhaustion, the loneliness, and the moments when simple acts of kindness from strangers had kept her going. That's why Mark's gesture resonated so deeply with her. It reminded her of those days when hope seemed distant, but humanity shone through. The next morning, Laura decided to act. She contacted a private investigator friend and asked him to find out more about Mark. Within a day, she learned everything. The long hours he worked at the warehouse, the struggles of raising his daughter alone, and the modest apartment they called home. The details painted a picture of a man who carried heavy burdens but still found room in his heart to care for others. Determined to repay his kindness, Laura spent the following days preparing. She bought groceries, toys for Lily, and other essentials, packing them neatly into boxes. But she didn't stop there. Knowing Mark's pride might prevent him from accepting charity outright, she also drafted a letter explaining her intentions. A few evenings later, Laura arrived at Mark's apartment building. It was a humble structure, its paint peeling and its steps creaking underfoot. As she knocked on his door, she braced herself for his reaction. Mark opened the door, looking surprised to see her. "Laura? What are you doing here?" "I came to thank you properly," she said with a warm smile, holding up the box of groceries. "And maybe return the favor." Mark frowned slightly, stepping outside to avoid waking Lily, who was asleep inside. "You didn't have to do this," he said firmly. "I was just helping." "I know," Laura replied softly. "But I want to help you now. You've got a lot on your plate, and it's okay to let someone lend a hand." Mark hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "Look, I appreciate it, but we're fine. We don't need charity." "It's not charity," Laura insisted. "It's gratitude. You helped me when I needed it most. Let me do the same for you." For a moment, neither spoke. Then Mark sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Why does it matter so much to you?" "Because sometimes," Laura said earnestly, "people need reminders that the world isn't all bad. You reminded me of that. Now, let me remind you." Her words struck a chord. Slowly, Mark nodded. "Okay, thank you." As Laura handed him the box, she noticed the relief in his eyes. A fleeting glimpse of vulnerability that told her she'd made the right decision. This was just the beginning. Little did Mark know, Laura's gratitude would soon turn into something far greater than either of them could have imagined. A few days after Laura's visit, Mark was still processing what had happened. The groceries she'd brought were a huge help. He hadn't realized how low their pantry had gotten until he unpacked the box. And the toys for Lily? She couldn't stop smiling, hugging her new stuffed bunny everywhere she went. But it wasn't just the gifts that stayed with him. It was Laura's words, her insistence that this wasn't charity, but gratitude. That small reminder that even in his toughest moments, he could still make a difference. Then, one evening, there was another knock at the door. Mark opened it to find Laura standing there again, this time dressed in business attire and carrying a leather folder. He blinked in surprise. "Laura? Is everything okay?" She smiled warmly. "Everything's fine. I just wanted to talk to you about something important." Mark stepped aside, letting her in. The apartment was modest but tidy, with Lily's drawings pinned to the fridge and mismatched furniture that showed years of use. Laura glanced around, taking it all in before sitting down at the small kitchen table. "So," Mark said cautiously, joining her, "what's this about?" Laura took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "First, let me tell you a little about myself. I'm not just someone who got a flat tire the other night. I run a successful company. My life hasn't always been easy, though. I've been where you are now, struggling to keep things together while raising a child alone." Mark nodded slowly, unsure where this was going. "What I'm trying to say is, I know how hard it can be, and when you helped me the other night, it reminded me of the kindness I received during my own tough times. It made me realize I want to pay it forward, to people like you." Mark frowned slightly. "People like me?" "Yes," Laura said firmly. "Good people who work hard and care for others, even when they're barely keeping themselves afloat. People who deserve a break." She opened the folder and slid a document across the table. "I'd like to offer you some support, not because I pity you, but because you inspired me. This is a proposal to help you secure stable employment with better pay, provide resources for Lily's education, and ease some of your financial burdens." Mark stared at the paper, stunned. "You're serious?" "Completely," Laura replied. "I've already spoken to a few contacts. There's a position at a logistics firm that would suit your skills perfectly. They're willing to offer training and benefits. Plus, I'd like to set up a fund for Lily's future schooling." Mark leaned back in his chair, overwhelmed. "Why are you doing this? We're strangers." "You stopped for me in the dark, Mark," Laura said softly. "You gave me peace of mind when I needed it most. That's not nothing, it's everything. You reminded me that kindness still exists, even in the busiest, hardest moments of life." Now, let me remind you. For a long moment, Mark didn't say anything. His mind raced with doubts. Was this too good to be true? Would accepting her help mean losing his independence? But then he thought of Lily, of the sacrifices he'd made to give her a better life. If this opportunity meant more stability for her, how could he turn it down? Finally, he looked at Laura, his voice steady but filled with emotion. Thank you, not just for this, but for believing in me when I wasn't sure anyone would. Laura smiled, her eyes glistening. Believe me, Mark, the thanks goes both ways. As they shook hands, neither knew exactly where this partnership would lead, but one thing was certain. Their lives were about to change in ways neither of them expected. Over the next few weeks, Laura's promises turned into reality. She introduced Mark to her network of professionals, helping him secure a stable job at a logistics company with better pay and benefits. The position allowed him to use his experience while learning new skills through training programs she arranged. For the first time in years, Mark felt a sense of stability, not just financially but emotionally. Laura also set up an education fund for Lily, ensuring she'd have access to quality schooling and extracurricular activities. When Lily started attending art classes, a passion she'd always dreamed of pursuing, Mark saw a spark in her eyes that he hadn't seen before. It was as if their entire family was breathing easier, unburdened by the constant weight of uncertainty. But accepting Laura's generosity wasn't easy for Mark. At first, he struggled with feelings of guilt and pride. He worried about what others might think. Was he taking advantage? Was this too much? His friends and co-workers raised eyebrows when they heard about the opportunities suddenly coming his way. One evening, after putting Lily to bed, Mark sat down with Laura, who had come over to check on them. I need to ask something, Mark said hesitantly. Why are you doing all this for us? I mean, we're strangers. You didn't owe me anything. Laura smiled gently. You're right. I didn't owe you. But kindness doesn't work like that, does it? You helped me without expecting anything in return. That's rare these days. And honestly, seeing how hard you work for Lily reminded me of my own journey. If I can make things a little easier for you too, why wouldn't I? Her words eased some of Mark's doubts, but he still felt the need to prove himself worthy of her trust. Determined not to take her help for granted, he threw himself into his new role at work, quickly earning respect from colleagues and supervisors alike. Outside of work, he volunteered his free time helping neighbors fix cars or tackle household repairs, refusing payment whenever someone offered. Why don't you accept money? One neighbor asked curiously after Mark repaired their broken fence. Because sometimes, Mark replied with a small smile, helping each other is enough. Word spread quickly about Mark's willingness to lend a hand. Soon, people in the community began looking out for him and Lily, bringing meals, babysitting, or offering rides when needed. What started as Laura's gesture blossomed into a web of support that strengthened their neighborhood. Meanwhile, Laura watched Mark's transformation with pride. She admired how he used her help not just for personal gain but to uplift those around him. One afternoon, as they sat together discussing future plans, Laura shared her vision. You know, she said thoughtfully, your story could inspire others. People hear about wealth and success all the time, but rarely do they see how kindness creates real change. Maybe it's time we share your journey with the world. Mark chuckled nervously. I'm no hero, Laura. Just a guy trying to get by. That's exactly why people will listen, Laura countered. Because deep down, everyone wants to believe that small acts of kindness matter. And yours clearly do. Though hesitant, Mark agreed to let Laura organize a local event highlighting stories of resilience and community building. To his surprise, hundreds showed up, not just to hear his story, but to celebrate the power of connection and generosity. As Mark stood before the crowd, holding Lily's hand, he realized something profound. Laura hadn't just changed their lives. She'd shown him how to keep changing others. Together, they were proving that kindness wasn't just a moment. It was a movement. Little did either of them know, this ripple of goodwill was only beginning to grow. Inspired by Laura's generosity and the outpouring of support from his community, Mark decided to dedicate himself to paying it forward. He knew firsthand how life-changing a single act of kindness could be, and he wanted to ensure that others experienced the same hope and compassion he had received. With Laura's encouragement, Mark launched a neighborhood initiative called Helping Hands, aimed at assisting struggling families in practical ways, fixing cars, repairing homes, providing groceries, or simply offering companionship. What started as a small effort quickly grew into a thriving network of volunteers eager to make a difference. Mark became a pillar of the community, organizing workshops where people could learn valuable skills like car maintenance, budgeting, and home repairs. His own experiences taught him that empowering others was just as important as offering immediate help. Teaching someone to fish is better than giving them a fish, he often said during these sessions. But sometimes you've got to give them the rod first. Laura continued to play a key role, using her resources to fund projects and connect Mark with organizations that shared their vision. Together, they expanded Helping Hands beyond their neighborhood, reaching underserved areas across the city. Local businesses donated tools and materials, while volunteers stepped up to lead initiatives in their own communities. One day, as Mark worked alongside a group of teenagers fixing bicycles for low-income families, he noticed how much joy they found in helping others. These kids, many of whom had faced challenges of their own, were discovering the power of giving back. "This is what it's all about," Mark told Laura later that evening. "It's not just about solving problems, it's about building connections. When people feel seen and valued, they start believing in themselves again." Laura nodded, smiling. "And look at what you've built. You're creating a chain reaction of kindness." Their partnership extended beyond Helping Hands. Mark began speaking at schools and community events, sharing his story to inspire young people to embrace empathy and resilience. Laura accompanied him to conferences, advocating for corporate responsibility and encouraging other wealthy individuals to invest in grassroots movements like theirs. Through it all, Mark remained humble, always redirecting praise to those around him. "I'm no different than anyone else here," he'd say. "We're all just trying to do our part." Lily, now thriving in school and embracing her artistic talents, proudly joined her dad at events, drawing pictures to auction off for charity. Her artwork became a symbol of hope, reminding everyone that even children could contribute to making the world brighter. One evening, as Mark and Laura walked through the bustling community center they had transformed together, they paused near a bulletin board covered in thank you notes from recipients of Helping Hands efforts. "These stories are incredible," Laura said, reading one note aloud. "Because of you, I can sleep at night knowing my roof won't leak anymore." Mark smiled softly. "It's not me, it's all of us. Kindness works best when it's shared." Laura placed a hand on his shoulder. "You may not see it, but you're the heart of this movement. People trust you because you live what you preach." For Mark, the journey had come full circle. From being the recipient of an unexpected act of kindness to becoming a beacon of hope for countless others. He had proven that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the lives we touched along the way. Little did either of them realize, their legacy of generosity was only beginning to take root. Across cities and countries, people inspired by their story were already taking steps to make their own corners of the world a little brighter. Years later, Mark stood on a stage in front of thousands of people at the annual Kindness Moves Us Forward Gala. The event celebrated not just his journey but the countless lives transformed by Helping Hands and its ripple effect across communities worldwide. As he looked out at the cheering crowd, Mark felt a deep sense of fulfillment. What had started as a simple act of changing a tire in the dark had grown into something far greater than he ever imagined. Laura sat in the front row, smiling proudly as she watched Mark deliver his speech. "When I stopped to help Laura that night," Mark began, his voice steady but filled with emotion, "I didn't think about changing my life or anyone else's. I just thought about doing what was right. But what happened next taught me an important lesson. Kindness matters. Compassion matters. And no matter how small your actions may seem, they can spark a chain reaction of positive change." The audience erupted into applause, many wiping away tears. For Mark, this moment wasn't about recognition. It was about reminding everyone present that they, too, had the power to make a difference. After the ceremony, Attendees lined up to thank him, not just for his generosity but for inspiring them to take action in their own communities. Teachers spoke of incorporating kindness projects into their classrooms. Business owners shared stories of adopting sustainable practices after hearing his speak. Families recounted how his story had encouraged them to volunteer together, strengthening their bonds while helping others. Meanwhile, Laura reflected on the ripple effect of her decision to repay Mark's kindness. Her gesture hadn't just changed his life, it had ignited a global movement. People from all walks of life were finding ways to give back, proving that humanity still held goodness at its core. For Mark, the legacy of kindness extended beyond material gifts. He continued mentoring young leaders, teaching them that true success lies in lifting others up. His community center became a model replicated in cities worldwide, each one tailored to meet local needs while staying true to its founding principles: compassion, connection, and service. One evening, as Mark and Laura walked through the park where their paths first crossed years ago, they stopped near the spot where the flat tire had been changed. A plaque now marked the site, inscribed with the words, "From one act of kindness to a world of change." "This is where it all started," Laura mused, glancing at Mark. Mark nodded, a soft smile on his face. "And now we're helping others find their own way to give back." In that moment, surrounded by the hum of laughter and music from the community center nearby, they both realized something profound. Their connection wasn't just about saving lives or changing circumstances. It was about creating a legacy of kindness that transcended time and place. For Laura, meeting Mark had reignited her belief in the goodness of humanity. For Mark, her generosity had shown him the incredible impact one person could have when they chose to care. Together, they had proven that kindness knows no boundaries. It simply requires an open heart and a willingness to act. Underneath the stars, surrounded by the echoes of gratitude and joy, Mark and Laura reflected on how far they'd come. Their legacy wasn't written in stone or etched in plaques. It was alive in the hearts of those they'd helped. And though neither knew exactly what the future held, one thing was certain: their circle of compassion would continue inspiring acts of kindness for generations to come. And so, the ripple of kindness continued, spreading outward and touching hearts across the world. One selfless act had sparked a movement, one that would endure long after Mark and Laura were gone. If this story inspired you, don't forget to share it with friends and family. Let us know in the comments, what's the kindest thing you've ever done? Your stories inspire us to keep creating tales that matter,